The bullet grazed the wooden post not 3 inches from Rebecca Stone's head, as she ducked behind the water trough. And all she could think about was how ridiculous it was that she'd worn her good Sunday dress to the general store on a Tuesday afternoon in Alta, Wyoming Territory, in the summer of 1878. She pressed her back against the rough wood, heart hammering in her chest as shouts echoed through the dusty street. The Johnson brothers were at it again, drunk and shooting at anything that moved, and here she was caught in the crossfire with nothing but a basket of flour and sugar to her name. Her father had warned her about coming into town alone, but Helena Turner was nothing if not stubborn, and she'd already grown tired of being called Rebecca anyway. Everyone back in Philadelphia had called her that, and she'd left that life behind 6 months ago. "Madam, you need to get down." A man's voice cut through the chaos, strong and urgent, but somehow not panicked. Helena turned her head to see a cowboy sprinting across the street, his long legs eating up the distance between them. He wore dusty chaps over worn denim, a brown hat pulled low over his face, and the way he moved suggested he'd done this sort of thing before. He slid into the space beside her, his shoulder pressing against hers as another shot rang out. "Those idiots couldn't hit the broad side of a barn, but that doesn't mean we should test the theory," he said, and Helena caught sight of green eyes beneath the brim of his hat, a face weathered by sun and wind but young still, maybe 25 at most. "I gathered as much," Helena replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. She was 23 and had faced down plenty of difficult situations in her life, though admittedly none that involved actual gunfire. The cowboy glanced at her, and something flickered across his face. "Surprise, maybe, or amusement. You're not from around here. What gave me away, the dress or the complete lack of terror?" He let out a short laugh, quick and genuine. "The accent, East Coast, Philadelphia." Another shot cracked through the air and Helena flinched despite herself. The cowboy shifted, positioning himself between her and the direction of the gunfire without making it obvious that's what he was doing. "That's a long way from Alta. What brings a Philadelphia lady to the Wyoming Territory?" "A very long story involving a very short engagement to a very terrible man." This time his laugh was fuller and he shook his head. "Well, that's honest at least." He peered around the edge of the trough. "Sheriff's coming. We'll be able to move in a minute." "Thank God." "My knees are not enjoying this position. Neither are mine, and I do this for a living." He looked back at her, and she caught the full force of his smile. It transformed his whole face, crinkling the corners of his eyes and revealing dimples in his stubbled cheeks. "You get shot at for a living?" "Sometimes. I'm a ranch hand at the Double S spread about 10 miles north of here. Name's Ryder Sullivan." He touched the brim of his hat with 2 fingers, a gesture so naturally polite it made Helena want to laugh at the absurdity of exchanging pleasantries while hiding from drunk gunmen. "Helena Turner. My father runs the new newspaper in town, the Alta Gazette. I saw they were setting up shop. About time we got some real news around here instead of just relying on gossip and telegraph wires." The shooting had stopped, and Helena could hear the sheriff's voice booming across the street, ordering the Johnson brothers to drop their weapons. Ryder eased up slowly, checking to make sure the situation was under control before offering Helena his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet with easy strength. "You all right, Miss Turner?" His hand lingered in hers for just a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Perfectly fine, Mr. Sullivan. Thank you for the company." "Ryder, please." "Mr. Sullivan is my father, and he's been dead 3 years now. I'm sorry." "Don't be. He lived a good life, died in his sleep at 62 after a full day's work and a better dinner. Can't ask for much more than that." Ryder bent down to retrieve her basket, which had tipped over in the commotion. The flour sack had split, coating the ground with white powder. "Looks like you'll need to replace this," Helena sighed. "And I'll have to explain to my father why I wasted money on flour we don't have any more. Tell him Ryder Sullivan will cover the cost, seeing as how you nearly got shot while buying supplies for your household. That's not necessary." "Maybe not, but it's right." He walked with her toward the general store, the street slowly coming back to life as people emerged from their hiding places. The sheriff had the Johnson brothers in hand, both of them looking considerably more sober now that they were staring down the barrel of jail time. Inside the store, Helena replaced her supplies while Ryder insisted on paying despite her protests. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Patterson, watched them with undisguised interest, and Helena knew she'd be the subject of gossip by sundown. A young woman new to town, unmarried, accepting help from one of the most eligible bachelors in the county. The rumor mill would churn that into engagement announcements by morning. "Don't mind her," Ryder said quietly as they left the store. "Mrs. Patterson means well, but she does love to talk." "I'm aware. She's already tried to set me up with her nephew twice. Poor Harold, nice enough fellow, but he's got the personality of a fence post." Helena laughed before she could stop herself, a real laugh that bubbled up from her chest. "That's terrible. It's also true. I went to school with him. He once spent an entire afternoon telling me about different types of nails." Ryder shifted her basket to his other hand. "Where are you headed? I'll walk you home." "Just down to the newspaper office. We live above it." They fell into step together, and Helena found herself acutely aware of Ryder's presence beside her. He was tall, easily 6 feet, with broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, green and clear and filled with a kind of quiet intelligence she hadn't expected. "So this terrible man you were engaged to," Ryder said as they walked. "Did you leave him at the altar or just leave him in general?" "Neither. He left me, actually, for a woman with a larger inheritance." Helena was surprised by how little it hurt to say it now. 3 months ago the wound had been fresh. Now it felt like something that had happened to someone else. Then he was an idiot. "You don't know me well enough to make that judgment. I know you didn't panic when bullets were flying. I know you've got a sense of humor even when your knees hurt. And I know you came all the way out to Wyoming Territory to start over, which takes courage." He glanced at her. That's enough to know he was an idiot. They'd reached the newspaper office, a modest building with large windows that let in plenty of light. Helena could see her father inside, bent over the printing press, his shirt sleeves rolled up and ink staining his fingers. "Thank you for the flour," she said, taking the basket from Ryder, "and for keeping me from getting shot." "My pleasure on both counts." He tipped his hat. "I don't suppose you'd be interested in attending the church social this Saturday. They're holding it down by the creek, and there'll be music and dancing." Helena hesitated. She'd come to Alta to escape romantic entanglements, to focus on helping her father build his newspaper and maybe figure out who she was outside of society's expectations. But Ryder was looking at her with such open hopefulness, and she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest when he smiled. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's not a no. I'll take it." He touched his hat again and started to walk away, then turned back. "Fair warning, Miss Turner. I tell terrible jokes. If you come on Saturday, you'll have to endure at least a dozen of them." "I'll consider myself warned." He grinned and continued down the street, and Helena watched him go before heading inside. Her father looked up from the press, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "Who was that?" Henry Turner asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Ryder Sullivan. He works at the Double S Ranch, and he's carrying your groceries because." Because the Johnson brothers decided to shoot up the town and he kept me from getting hit. Henry's expression shifted immediately from curious to concerned. Are you all right? I'm fine, Father, truly, just a bit shaken. She set the basket on the counter. He's invited me to the church social on Saturday. Are you going to go? Helena thought about Ryder's smile, the way he'd positioned himself between her and danger without making a show of it, his easy humor in the face of chaos. Maybe. The rest of the week passed in a blur of activity. The newspaper was preparing its third edition, and Helena threw herself into helping her father write articles, set type, and manage subscriptions. She interviewed the schoolteacher about plans for the fall term, wrote a piece about the new irrigation system some of the ranchers were implementing, and carefully avoided thinking about Saturday. But Saturday came anyway, bright and clear, and Helena found herself standing in front of her small wardrobe trying to decide what to wear. She'd brought limited clothing from Philadelphia, most of it impractical for life in the Wyoming Territory. Finally, she settled on a simple blue dress with white trim, modest but flattering, and braided her dark hair into a crown around her head. Her father raised an eyebrow when she came downstairs but said nothing, just smiled and told her to have a good time. She walked to the church alone, following the sound of fiddle music and laughter down to the creek where someone had strung up lanterns and set out blankets on the grass. She spotted Ryder almost immediately. He was talking to a group of men near one of the food tables, his hat in his hands, his dark hair slightly damp like he'd recently dunked his head in water to clean up. He wore a clean shirt and vest, and she noticed he'd shaved since she'd seen him last. As if sensing her presence, he turned, and his whole face lit up when he saw her. He excused himself from the conversation and crossed the distance between them in long strides. You came. I said I'd think about it. And your thoughts led you here. I'm grateful. He offered his arm. Can I get you some lemonade? Mrs. Patterson made it, and despite her tendency to gossip, she makes excellent lemonade. Helena took his arm, and they walked toward the refreshment table together. She was acutely aware of the eyes following them, the whispers behind hands. Small-town life was very different from Philadelphia, where she could disappear into crowds and maintain her anonymity. You're going to be tomorrow's headline, she said quietly. Worth it, Ryder replied, equally quiet. He poured her a glass of lemonade, and their fingers brushed as he handed it to her. Besides, I've been the subject of gossip before. Comes with being single at 25 in a town where most men are married by 22. Why aren't you married? Never found the right person. He took a drink of his own lemonade. Came close once when I was 21. Sarah Jenkins. Pretty girl, sweet disposition. But when I actually thought about spending my whole life with her, waking up next to her every morning, raising children with her, I just felt nothing. She deserved someone who felt something. That was kind of you. She's married now to a farmer over in Sheridan, has 2 kids and seems happy, so it worked out. He set down his glass. What about you? Was the terrible man your first engagement, my only engagement? I had suitors before, of course. Philadelphia society is very particular about these things, but Charles was the first one my parents approved of, and I thought I loved him. She paused, considering. Looking back, I think I loved the idea of him more than the actual man. He was handsome and came from a good family, and I thought that was enough. What changed your mind? I overheard him talking to his friend at a party. He said that my inheritance would be enough to pay off his gambling debts and fund his lifestyle for at least 5 years, at which point he'd worry about how to get more money out of me. The memory still stung, but distantly, like an old bruise that had mostly healed. He never loved me at all. I was just a bank account in a pretty dress. Ryder's jaw tightened. If I ever meet Charles, I'm going to have words with him. He's not worth the energy." Helena smiled. "Besides, if he hadn't shown his true colors, I never would have convinced my father to move out here and start the newspaper. So in a way, I should thank him for being a terrible person." That's a remarkably optimistic way of looking at it. I'm a remarkably optimistic person. It's gotten me into trouble before. The fiddle player struck up a new tune, something lively and quick, and couples began forming on the makeshift dance floor. Ryder held out his hand. "Dance with me." Helena set down her lemonade and placed her hand in his. "I should warn you, I only know East Coast dances, waltzes and quadrilles." "Lucky for you, the Wyoming Territory has adopted most of those. We're not complete barbarians out here." He led her onto the dance floor and pulled her into position for a waltz. His hand was warm on her waist, his other hand holding hers with surprising gentleness. When the music started, he moved with easy confidence, guiding her through the steps. "You're a good dancer," Helena said, surprised. "My mother insisted on lessons. She said just because we lived on a ranch didn't mean we had to act like animals." He spun her gently. "She died when I was 15, but some things stick with you. I'm sorry about your mother. Thank you. She was a good woman, strong. She could outride most of the ranch hands and could shoot a rattlesnake from 30 paces. But she also loved poetry and insisted on fresh flowers on the table every week, even in winter when she had to force bulbs in the kitchen." He smiled at the memory. "I think you would have liked her." The song ended, and another began, slower this time. Ryder didn't let go, and Helena didn't pull away. They swayed together, and she found herself relaxing into his arms. "So those terrible jokes you promised," she said. "I've been here almost an hour and you haven't told a single one. You want me to tell jokes? Right now?" "You promised at least a dozen. I'm holding you to it." Ryder laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "All right, what do you call a cow with no legs?" "I have no idea." "Ground beef." Helena groaned. "That's awful. I warned you. What do you call a cow with 2 legs?" "What?" "Lean beef." This time Helena laughed despite herself, shaking her head. "These are terrible." "Oh, I'm just getting started. Why did the cowboy adopt a dachshund?" "Why?" "Someone told him to get a long little doggy." Helena laughed again, genuine and bright, and Ryder's face transformed. He looked at her like she'd just given him the greatest gift in the world, his eyes soft and his smile wide. "There it is," he said softly. "There's what?" "Your real laugh. The one that comes from your heart, not just your head." He pulled her slightly closer, still perfectly proper but intimate somehow. "I could listen to that sound every day for the rest of my life and never get tired of it." Helena's breath caught in her throat. They'd known each other less than a week, had spent maybe a handful of hours in each other's company. But the way he looked at her, the way she felt when she was near him, it was unlike anything she'd experienced before. This wasn't the mild affection she'd felt for Charles or the lukewarm interest she'd had in other suitors. This was a fire in her chest, a certainty in her bones. "That's a dangerous thing to say to someone you barely know," she managed. "Maybe. But I've always believed in being honest about what I want." He guided her through another turn. "And I want to see where this goes, Helena, if you're willing. I came to Alta to start fresh, to figure out who I am without society's expectations weighing me down. I'm not asking you to give that up. I'm asking if I can be part of your fresh start." The song ended and they stood there for a moment, hands still clasped, eyes locked. Around them, people were laughing and talking, moving on to the next dance or heading toward the food tables. But Helena felt like she and Ryder were in their own world, separate from everything else. "Ask me again in a month," she said finally. "Give us time to really know each other, then we'll see." "A month," Ryder agreed. "I can work with that." He walked her home that evening, taking the long way through town so they could talk more. He told her about life on the Double S Ranch, about the work of managing cattle and horses, about the beauty of the Wyoming landscape that still took his breath away even after living here his whole life. She told him about Philadelphia, about her work at the newspaper, about her dreams of maybe becoming a real journalist someday, not just her father's assistant. When they reached the newspaper office, he didn't try to kiss her, just took her hand and pressed it gently. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "Thank you for the terrible jokes. Oh, I've got plenty more where those came from. What do you call it when a cow jumps over a barbed wire fence? What? Utter destruction." Helena laughed again, and she saw that look on his face again, like her laughter was the most precious thing in the world. She squeezed his hand and went inside, watching from the window as he walked away, whistling a tune she recognized from the dance. Her father was still awake, reading by lamplight. He looked up when she entered, a knowing smile on his face. "Good evening." "Very good," Helena admitted, unable to keep the smile off her face. "Ryder Sullivan seems like a decent man." "He is. But, no buts, he's kind and funny and honest. I just want to take my time, make sure I'm not making the same mistake I made with Charles." Henry set down his book and removed his glasses. "Helena, I should have said something before you got engaged to Charles, but I didn't, and I've regretted it ever since. I never liked that man. He was too polished, too perfect, like a snake oil salesman selling you dreams that would evaporate the moment you bought them. Why didn't you say anything? Because you seemed happy, and I thought maybe I was wrong, but I should have trusted my instincts." He stood and crossed to her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "My instincts about Ryder are different. That's a good man, Helena. The kind who'll work hard and treat you right and make you laugh every day. Don't let fear of repeating the past stop you from embracing the future." Helena hugged her father tightly. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just haven't always been willing to listen." Over the next month, Ryder found reasons to come into town at least 3 times a week. He'd stop by the newspaper office with fresh eggs from the ranch chickens or wild flowers he'd picked on the ride in. He'd help Helena with heavy lifting, moving boxes of paper and carrying equipment. And he always had a new terrible joke ready. "What do you call a sleeping bull?" he asked one afternoon while helping her set type for the next edition. "What? A bulldozer." Helena threw a wadded piece of paper at him. "You're incorrigible, you're laughing. I'm laughing at you, not with you. I'll take it." He finished setting the line of type and stepped back to admire his work. "You're a good teacher. I might actually be able to do this if I ever decide to give up ranching. Don't let the other ranch hands hear you say that. They'll think you're going soft. Too late. They already know I'm soft when it comes to you." He said it casually, but there was weight behind the words. Helena looked up from her work. "Ryder, I know, a month. I'm not pushing, I promise. Just stating facts." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "But the facts are that I think about you first thing in the morning and last thing at night, that your laugh is my favorite sound. That I'm falling in love with you, Helena Turner, and I'm not afraid to say it." Her hands stilled on the type. "It's only been 3 weeks. I don't care if it's been 3 days or 3 years. Some things you just know." He turned to face her fully. "I'm not asking you to say it back. I'm just being honest about where I stand." Helena set down the piece of type carefully and looked at him, really looked at him. At the sun lines around his eyes, the strength in his jaw, the absolute sincerity in his expression. This was a man who said what he meant and meant what he said. No games, no hidden agendas, just pure, honest emotion. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if I'm wrong again? What if I think I know you, but I don't really? Then you'll learn more and I'll learn more about you and we'll figure it out together. He reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly tender. Love isn't about knowing everything right from the start. It's about choosing to know someone every day, over and over again. Where did a cowboy learn to talk like that? My mother's poetry books. I told you she loved poetry. I read every single one after she died, trying to feel close to her. He smiled. Turns out all that romantic verse sticks with a person. Helena made a decision. She stepped forward and kissed him, soft and brief but deliberate. When she pulled back, Ryder's eyes were wide with surprise and delight. What was that for? For being you, for being patient, for making me laugh even when I don't want to. She paused. For making me believe in this. Us. Ryder's smile could have lit up the whole territory. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her again, deeper this time, and Helena felt like she was coming home to a place she'd never been before. They were interrupted by her father clearing his throat from the doorway. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers, and Henry chuckled. Sorry to intrude, but we do have a newspaper to finish. You can continue this later. Yes, sir, Ryder said, his ears reddening. I should probably get back to the ranch anyway. Boss will wonder where I've gotten to. He said his goodbyes and left, but not before stealing one more quick kiss when Henry's back was turned. Helena watched him go, her fingers pressed to her lips. That's a good man, her father said again. I know, Helena replied. I'm starting to believe it. The weeks turned into months. Summer faded into fall, and the aspens in the mountains turned gold and red. Ryder courted Helena properly, taking her on picnics in the foothills, escorting her to church on Sundays, and helping out around the newspaper office whenever he had spare time. The town accepted them as a couple, and the gossip shifted from speculation to expectation. When would Ryder Sullivan finally propose to that Turner girl? Helena didn't mind the talk. She was happy, genuinely happy, in a way she'd never been before. Ryder made her laugh every single day, his terrible jokes becoming a cherished ritual. But more than that, he listened to her. When she talked about her ideas for the newspaper, her frustration with being dismissed because she was a woman, her dreams of doing real investigative journalism, he didn't just nod along. He engaged, asked questions, challenged her to think bigger. Why just the local newspaper? He asked one crisp October afternoon as they rode out to see the fall colors. He taught her to ride Western style and she'd taken to it with enthusiasm. Why not write for the bigger papers in Cheyenne or Denver? They'd never take me seriously. Why not? I'm a woman. So, you're also a better writer than half the journalists I've read in those papers. He guided his horse around a fallen log. Send them something. What's the worst that could happen? They reject me. Then you'll be in the same position you're in now, but at least you'll have tried. He looked over at her. You're braver than you give yourself credit for, Helena. She thought about that conversation for days. Finally, she wrote an article about the water rights disputes happening in the region, carefully researching both sides and interviewing ranchers, farmers, and territorial officials. She sent it to 3 different newspapers and tried not to think about it. 2 weeks later, she received a response from the Rocky Mountain News in Denver. They wanted to publish her piece. They'd pay her $20 for it, and they wanted to know if she had other stories to tell. She ran to the ranch to tell Ryder, not even bothering to saddle her horse properly in her excitement. She found him in the barn, repairing a saddle, and practically tackled him with her enthusiasm. They want to publish it. Denver wants my story. Ryder caught her, laughing, spinning her around. I knew they would. You're brilliant. You're the one who told me to try. I just pointed out what was already there. He set her down but kept his arms around her waist. I'm proud of you. Helena kissed him, pouring all her joy and gratitude and love into it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ryder's expression had shifted into something serious. "Marry me," he said. Helena's heart stopped. "What? Marry me, Helena? I know we haven't been courting that long, but I know my heart. I want to wake up next to you every morning and hear your terrible jokes. My jokes. You're the one with terrible jokes. See? We're perfect for each other. We can be terrible together." He took her hands in his. "I love you. I love your ambition and your courage and the way you snort when you laugh really hard. I love that you're not afraid to get your hands dirty at the printing press, and I love that you dream bigger than this small town. Marry me, and I'll support every dream you have. What if my dreams take me away from Alta? Then we'll figure it out. Maybe I'll come with you, maybe we'll split our time, maybe we'll make it work in ways we haven't even thought of yet." He squeezed her hands. "I'm not asking you to give up anything, Helena. I'm asking to be part of your life, however that looks." Helena felt tears prick her eyes. This was nothing like Charles's proposal, which had been calculated and performed in front of witnesses to ensure she couldn't refuse. This was raw and real, and everything she'd never known she wanted. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Ryder whooped and picked her up again, spinning her until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her so thoroughly that she forgot her own name. "I need to do this properly," he said when they finally came up for air. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was simple, a gold band with a small diamond, nothing ostentatious but clearly chosen with care. "This was my mother's. My father gave it to me before he died and told me to give it to the woman who made me want to be a better man. That's you, Helena. You make me want to be better every single day." He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. Helena stared at it, at the way it caught the light, at the weight of it on her hand. "A promise. A future. When?" she asked. "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next month, next year, I'm not going anywhere. Spring," Helena decided. "I want to get married in the spring when everything's blooming and new. Spring it is." They set the date for May, giving them 7 months to prepare. Helena threw herself into planning the wedding while also continuing her work at the newspaper and writing more pieces for the Rocky Mountain News. The Denver paper published 3 more of her articles over the winter, and she started to build a reputation as a serious journalist. Ryder spent those months building them a house on a piece of land adjacent to the Double S Ranch. It wasn't large, just 3 rooms and a porch, but he built it with his own hands, cutting and fitting every board, ensuring every corner was square and every window let in maximum light. He built her a desk by the window where she could write, with cubbies for her papers and drawers for her notes. "I know we'll probably be on the ranch a lot, working," he said, showing her the space on a cold January afternoon. "But I wanted you to have a place that's just yours. A room of your own where you can write and think and be Helena Turner, journalist, not just Mrs. Sullivan, ranch wife." Helena ran her fingers over the smooth wood of the desk, emotion clogging her throat. "You built this for me. I'd build you a castle if I could. This is just a start." She turned to him, this man who saw her as a whole person, not just a wife or a helpmeet, but a woman with her own dreams and ambitions. "I love you, Ryder Sullivan. I love you too." He pulled her close, and they stood in the empty house, imagining the life they'd build together within these walls. Winter in the Wyoming Territory was harsh, but Helena found she didn't mind it as much as she'd expected. She and Ryder would bundle up and go for walks in the snow, their breath misting in the cold air, their hands clasped together. He'd tell her stories about growing up on the ranch, about winters so cold the cattle's breath would freeze, about digging through snow to find hay for the horses. She'd tell him about Philadelphia winters, So different with their society parties and ice skating on frozen ponds in the park. "You miss it?" he asked one evening as they sat by the fire in her father's sitting room. Henry had discreetly excused himself to work on the newspaper, giving them privacy. "Sometimes," Helena admitted. "I miss my mother, though we write letters regularly. I miss some of my friends, but I don't miss the life. The constant pressure to be perfect, to say the right things and wear the right clothes and marry the right man." "You don't think I'm the right man," Ryder teased. "You're the right man for me, but you would have been all wrong for Philadelphia, Helena." She curled into his side. "That's not who I am anymore, though." "Who are you now?" Helena thought about it. "I'm someone who knows what she wants. I'm someone who's not afraid to work hard for her dreams. I'm someone who's found a place where she belongs. Here in Alta, here with you." Ryder kissed the top of her head. "Best answer." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire crackle. Then Ryder shifted. "I should probably tell you something," he said, his tone carefully casual. "What?" "The Double S Ranch. My boss, Samuel Sterling, he's getting older. He's 68 now, and his health isn't what it used to be. He doesn't have any children of his own. Okay, he's offered to sell me the ranch. He'd stay on as a partner for a few years, help with the transition, but eventually it would be mine. Ours," he corrected, "if we want it." Helena sat up straight. "Ryder, that's incredible. That ranch is thousands of acres." "About 8,000, yeah. It's a huge opportunity, but it's also a huge responsibility. And it would mean we're definitely tied to Alta, at least for the foreseeable future." He looked at her seriously. "I know you're building your writing career. I don't want to make a decision that limits you. Can I think about it? Of course. We don't have to decide right away. Samuel said he'd give me until summer to make up my mind." Helena did think about it, long and hard. She talked to her father, who pointed out that being a ranch owner's wife would give her stability and resources to pursue her writing. She wrote to her mother in Philadelphia, who responded that Helena should follow her heart. She even talked to Mrs. Patterson at the general store, who assured her that plenty of women managed both ranch life and their own pursuits. In the end, it came down to a simple truth. She wanted to build a life with Ryder, and the ranch was part of who he was. She could write from anywhere, but his skills and passion were tied to the land. "Yes," she told him on a February evening when the stars were so bright they looked like diamonds scattered across black velvet. "Let's buy the ranch." Ryder whooped and picked her up, spinning her around just like he had when she'd agreed to marry him. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. We'll make it work. I'll write, you'll ranch, and we'll build something amazing together. We're going to need to hire more hands. The ranch is big, and I can't manage it alone. Then we'll hire good people. We'll build a team." Helena paused. "And maybe eventually we'll expand. Start breeding horses as well as cattle. I read an article about how there's growing demand for quality horses back east." Ryder looked at her with admiration. "Look at you, already thinking like a ranch owner. I'm thinking like your partner. Even better." They told Samuel the next day, and the old rancher nearly cried with relief. He'd been worried about what would happen to the land he'd spent his whole life building, afraid it would be sold to someone who didn't love it the way he did. "You're like the son I never had, Ryder," Samuel said, shaking his hand. "And Helena, I can tell you're going to bring fresh ideas to this place. I'm excited to see what you two do with it." They worked out the details over the next few weeks. Ryder would buy the ranch over time, with Samuel carrying the note at a fair interest rate. Samuel would stay on in a smaller house on the property, helping with the transition and offering advice. It was a good arrangement, fair to everyone involved. Spring came early to the Wyoming Territory that year. By late March, wildflowers were already blooming in the foothills, and the snow had retreated to only the highest peaks. Helena's mother arrived from Philadelphia in April, along with two of Helena's closest friends, ready to help prepare for the wedding. Margaret Turner was a formidable woman, elegant and sharp-tongued, and she made no secret of her initial skepticism about Ryder. "So you're the cowboy who's stolen my daughter's heart," she said upon meeting him, looking him up and down with a critical eye. "Yes, madam," Ryder replied, standing straight but not intimidated. "Though I like to think she gave it rather than me stealing it." Margaret's lips twitched. "Smooth talker. Just honest, madam, we'll see." But over the next few weeks, Margaret warmed to Ryder. He won her over not with grand gestures but with small kindnesses, helping her with her trunk, fixing a broken window in her room at the boarding house, and most importantly, making Helena laugh every single day. "He'll do," Margaret told her daughter one evening as they were addressing wedding invitations. "He's nothing like I imagined for you, but he's exactly what you need." "I know," Helena said, smiling at a memory of Ryder's latest terrible joke. "What do you call a grumpy cow, Moody?" She'd laughed so hard she'd snorted, and he'd looked at her like she'd hung the moon. The wedding day arrived bright and clear, the sky a brilliant blue overhead. They decided to hold the ceremony outdoors, in a meadow near the new house, with the mountains as their backdrop. The whole town turned out, along with ranch hands from the Double S and neighboring spreads, and even a few people Helena had interviewed for her articles who'd traveled to attend. Helena wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her slimmer frame, with wildflowers woven into her dark hair. Her father walked her down the makeshift aisle, tears in his eyes. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered as they approached the simple wooden arch where Ryder waited with the minister. "Your mother would be too." "She is," Helena whispered back, nodding toward where Margaret sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Then she was standing in front of Ryder, and the rest of the world fell away. He looked handsome in his dark suit, his hair neatly combed, but it was his eyes that held her attention. They were shining with emotion, with love and joy and certainty. The minister began the ceremony, but Helena barely heard the words. She was too focused on Ryder, on the way he held her hands like they were precious, on the way his voice shook slightly when he said his vows. "I promise to love you in sunshine and in storm," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "To support your dreams even when they scare me, to make you laugh even when you don't want to, and to build a life with you that honors both of us, every single day." Helena's own vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to choose you every morning for the rest of my life. To be your partner in all things, to laugh at your terrible jokes, and to love you with everything I have." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ryder kissed her with such tenderness that Helena felt tears slip down her cheeks. The crowd cheered, and someone started playing a fiddle, and just like that, they were married. The reception was a joyful chaos of food and music and dancing. Ryder pulled Helena onto the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife, and she went willingly, fitting perfectly into his arms. "Hello, Mrs. Sullivan," he said softly. "Hello, Mr. Sullivan." She smiled up at him. "How does it feel to be a married man? Like the luckiest person alive." He spun her gently. "How does it feel to be a married woman, like coming home?" They danced until the stars came out, until Helena's feet hurt and Ryder's collar was loosened, and they were both giddy with happiness and exhaustion. Finally, as the party was winding down, they slipped away to their new house to begin their life together in earnest. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. Helena had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, early mornings, hard physical work, and the constant demands of animals and land. But she also found space for her writing, carving out hours in the afternoon or late at night to work on her articles. The Rocky Mountain News continued to publish her pieces, and she even started getting interest from papers in San Francisco and Chicago. Ryder threw himself into learning all the details of running the Double S, working closely with Samuel to understand the business side of ranching. He hired 3 new ranch hands, good men who worked hard and respected both him and Helena. Together, they started implementing Helena's idea of breeding quality horses, beginning with 2 mares and a stallion with excellent bloodlines. They had their first real fight 6 months into their marriage, over something so stupid Helena couldn't even remember later what started it. Something about Ryder tracking mud into the house, which led to Helena snapping at him about being more careful, which led to Ryder saying she was being unreasonable, which led to both of them saying things they didn't mean. Helena ended up storming out to the barn, furious and hurt. She was mucking out stalls when Ryder found her an hour later. "I'm sorry," he said quietly from the doorway. "I'm sorry too." Helena stabbed the pitchfork into the hay. "I don't even know why we were fighting." "Because we're tired and stressed and learning how to be married while also running a ranch." He came closer. "Because we're human and imperfect and sometimes we're going to mess up. I don't like fighting with you. I don't like it either." He took the pitchfork from her hands and set it aside, then pulled her into his arms. "But I love that even when we fight, you don't run away, you stay and work through it. Where would I go? This is my home now. It's our home." He kissed her forehead. "And I promise to try harder not to track mud inside. And I promise to try harder not to snap at you over small things." They held each other in the barn, breathing in the scent of hay and horses, and Helena felt the tension drain from her body. This was marriage, she realized. Not the fairy tale romance of courtship, but the daily choice to love someone even when they annoyed you, to work through problems instead of running from them. Their second year of marriage brought both challenges and joys. A late spring snowstorm killed several calves, and they lost money on the investment. But the horse breeding program started showing promise, with both mares producing healthy foals that attracted interest from buyers as far away as Denver. Helena's writing career continued to grow. She published a long-form piece about women ranchers in the Wyoming Territory that was picked up by Harper's Magazine. And suddenly, she was getting letters from women all over the country thanking her for telling their stories. She started thinking bigger, about maybe writing a book someday, a collection of stories about Western women. On a warm summer evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Helena realized something. "I'm happy," she said out loud, surprised by the simple truth of it. Ryder looked over at her from his rocking chair. "Just figuring that out. No, I've been happy, but this is different. This is settled happy, content happy." She tried to find the words. "When I first came to Alta, I was running away from something. My failed engagement, my old life. But somewhere along the way, I stopped running away and started running toward you, toward this life, toward the person I'm becoming." "And who's that?" Ryder asked softly. "Someone whole. Someone who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to go after it. Someone who can be a journalist and a rancher's wife and maybe someday a mother, all at once, without losing any piece of herself." Ryder reached over and took her hand. "I'm proud of you. For the writing, for the way you've taken to ranch life, for everything. You're extraordinary, Helena." "We're extraordinary," she corrected. "We make each other better." "True." He squeezed her hand. "Speaking of making each other better, I have a terrible joke for you." Helena groaned but smiled. "Let's hear it." "What do you call it when a cow gets angry at a fence?" "What?" "Barbed wire." Helena laughed, that full-hearted laugh that Ryder loved so much, and she saw his face light up the way it always did. After more than 2 years together, that look still made her heart flutter. "You know," she said. "I used to think I wanted someone sophisticated, someone who quoted Shakespeare and knew which fork to use at fancy dinners. And now I know that the right person is the one who makes you laugh, even with terrible cow jokes. The one who supports your dreams and builds you a desk by the window. The one who sees all of you and loves all of you, even the parts that aren't easy. Even the part that tracks mud in the house. Especially that part, because it means you're working hard for us." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. Helena thought about the path that had brought her here, from Philadelphia society to a ranch in the Wyoming Territory. It hadn't been the life she'd planned, but it was better than anything she could have imagined. By their 3rd anniversary, the Double S Ranch was thriving. Samuel had officially retired the year before, spending his days fishing and telling stories to anyone who would listen. Ryder had proven himself a capable owner, making smart decisions about stock and land management while also being fair and kind to his employees. Helena had published her first book, a collection of profiles about Western women, and it had sold better than expected. She was already working on a second book. This one focused on the water rights issues in the Wyoming Territory. The local newspaper had grown too, with her father hiring an assistant to help with the workload. But the best news came on a cool October morning when Helena woke up feeling queasy. She'd been tired lately, emotional in ways that weren't like her, and when she realized she'd missed her monthly courses, her heart started to race. She told Ryder that evening over dinner, unable to keep the secret for even a few hours. "I think I'm pregnant," she said, setting down her fork. Ryder froze, a piece of bread halfway to his mouth. "You think?" "I'm fairly certain. All the signs are there. I'll need to see the doctor to be sure, but yes, I think we're going to have a baby." The bread fell from Ryder's hand, forgotten. He stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled over, crossed to Helena in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. "A baby," he breathed. "We're having a baby." "Are you happy?" Helena asked, even though she could feel his joy radiating through every inch of his body. "Happy." "Helena, I'm ecstatic, I'm terrified, I'm everything." He pulled back to look at her face. "Are you happy?" "I'm all of those things too. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but now that it's real, I am. We are." They confirmed the pregnancy with the doctor a week later. The baby would arrive in late May or early June, right around their 4th wedding anniversary. Helena immediately started preparing, reading every book about babies and childbirth she could get her hands on. Ryder started building a cradle in the evenings, carving intricate designs into the wood. The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Helena had to slow down her work somewhat as she got bigger. She continued writing but stopped making trips into town as frequently. Ryder became even more protective, hovering and worrying in ways that were both touching and occasionally irritating. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Helena said one afternoon when Ryder insisted on carrying a basket that weighed all of 5 pounds. "I know, but I can't help it. You're carrying our child. I want to make everything easier for you." "You can make things easier by not treating me like I'm fragile. I'm still me, just with a bigger middle." Ryder laughed and handed her the basket. "Point taken, but I'm still not letting you ride horses or help with the branding." "That's fair." In late May, when the wildflowers were in full bloom and the weather was perfect, Helena went into labor. It was long and hard, lasting through the night and into the next afternoon. Ryder stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, and enduring her cursing him for getting her into this situation in the first place. Finally, just as the sun was setting on their 4th anniversary, Helena gave birth to a healthy baby boy. He came into the world screaming, red-faced and furious, with a shock of dark hair and his father's green eyes. "A son," Ryder said, his voice choked with emotion as the doctor placed the baby in his arms. "We have a son." Helena, exhausted and sweaty and more tired than she'd ever been in her life, smiled. "What should we name him?" They'd discussed names during the pregnancy but hadn't settled on anything. Now, looking at this tiny person who was half her and half Ryder, Helena knew exactly what to call him. "Henry," she said. "After my father, Henry Robert Sullivan. It's perfect." Ryder carefully placed the baby in Helena's arms, and she looked down at her son, feeling a rush of love so intense it took her breath away. Little Henry was a good baby, relatively speaking. He slept in decent stretches, nursed well, and seemed content to be passed around to the various adults in his life. Margaret came from Philadelphia to stay for a month, helping Helena navigate the challenges of new motherhood. Helena's father visited almost daily, completely besotted with his grandson. Ryder was a natural father. He'd walk the floor with Henry at night, singing off-key lullabies and telling the baby terrible jokes even though Henry couldn't understand them yet. "Why did the cow cross the road?" Ryder asked the baby one night as he changed his diaper. "To get to the other side." Helena, watching from the bed, laughed softly. "He can't even talk yet. Got to start his education early. By the time he's old enough to understand, he'll have heard every cow joke in existence. Lucky him." Life settled into a new rhythm. Helena found she could still write, stealing hours during Henry's naps or in the early morning before he woke. The work came slower now, but it was still there, still important to her. Ryder managed the ranch with one eye always on the house, ready to help whenever Helena needed him. When Henry was 6 months old, sitting up and starting to show his personality, they had a ranch party to celebrate both his birth and the double Estiquette's successful year. It had been 5 years since Ryder and Helena first met, hiding behind that water trough while bullets flew overhead. "Remember when we met?" Helena asked as they watched their friends and neighbors celebrate in the yard. Henry was being passed around, giggling at the attention. "How could I forget? You had flour all over your dress and you were the calmest person I'd ever seen under fire." "I was terrified. You didn't show it." Ryder put his arm around her waist. "I thought you were the most interesting woman I'd ever met, even before I laughed at your jokes." "Especially before that. But when you did laugh, when you really laughed at that dance, that's when I knew." "Knew what?" "That I was going to marry you, that you were my forever." He kissed her temple. "Best decision I ever made pursuing you. You didn't really pursue me. You just showed up with eggs and flowers and terrible jokes until I gave in." "Exactly. Pursuit." He grinned at her. "It worked, didn't it?" Helena laughed and leaned into him, watching their son charm everyone at the party. This life, this beautiful, messy, chaotic life, was nothing like what she'd imagined back in Philadelphia. It was better. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. When Henry was 2, Helena gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Rose, who had their mother's dark hair and their father's mischievous streak. The house that had seemed so spacious suddenly felt cramped, and Ryder spent a summer adding on 2 more rooms. Helena's writing career evolved. She published 2 more books and became a regular contributor to several major newspapers. She wrote about ranching and water rights, about the changing West and the women who were shaping it. She won awards and recognition, becoming one of the most respected journalists covering the Western Territories. But she was also a mother and a ranch wife, involved in every aspect of the double Estiquette operations. She kept the books, managed the household, and worked alongside Ryder in planning the ranch's future. They expanded the horse breeding program, and their animals became sought after throughout the region. When Henry was 8 and the twins were 6, Helena found herself pregnant again. This time, it was another boy whom they named Samuel after the old rancher who had passed away peacefully in his sleep the year before. Baby Sam was quieter than his siblings, more contemplative, and Ryder joked that he was clearly going to be the intellectual of the family. The children grew up surrounded by love and laughter. Ryder's terrible jokes became a family tradition, with the kids groaning and giggling in equal measure. Henry started helping on the ranch as soon as he was old enough, showing a natural affinity for the work. The twins were inseparable, wild and free, racing across the prairie on their ponies. Sam followed his older siblings everywhere, his serious little face a constant source of amusement. Helena made sure all her children learned to read and write, taught them to value education and hard work. But she also taught them to laugh, to find joy in small things, to be kind and fair. Ryder taught them about the land, about respecting nature and taking care of animals, about the importance of keeping your word. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Ryder and Helena rode out to the meadow where they'd gotten married. The children were staying with Helena's father for the night, giving them rare time alone. 15 years, Helena said, dismounting from her horse. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like just yesterday that you were telling me terrible cow jokes at the church social. I've got plenty more where those came from. Ryder helped her spread out a blanket on the grass. What do you call a cow that plays guitar? I don't know what. A musician. Helena laughed, the same full-hearted laugh that had captured Ryder's heart 15 years ago. He looked at her, this woman who had started as a stranger hiding from bullets and become his whole world, and felt overwhelming gratitude. I love you, he said simply. I love you too. Helena lay down on the blanket, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Did you ever imagine our lives would turn out like this? No. I hoped I'd find someone to love, hoped I'd make a success of the ranch, but I never dared imagine this much happiness. He lay down beside her, taking her hand. You gave me everything, Helena. A family, a purpose, a life worth living. We gave each other that. She rolled onto her side to face him. I was so lost when I came to Alta, running away from a life that didn't fit, not knowing what I was running toward. And then there you were, making terrible jokes and looking at me like I was something precious. You are precious. You're everything. They made love under the stars, 15 years of intimacy, and knowing each other making it both familiar and new. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked about their children, about the ranch, about Helena's latest writing project, about everything and nothing. As they rode back home in the moonlight, Ryder reached over and took Helena's hand. Thank you, he said. For what? For laughing at my jokes that first time, for giving me a chance, for choosing me every day for 15 years. It's been the easiest choice I've ever made. Helena squeezed his hand. Here's to 15 more years. 15 more years of terrible jokes and laughter and love. I'll drink to that. Or, well, toast to it, we don't have drinks. The sentiment stands. They rode home to their children, to their life, to the future they were building together one day at a time. The years continued to pass, marked by both triumphs and sorrows. Henry grew into a fine young man, taking over more and more of the ranch operations as Ryder gradually stepped back. The twins became accomplished riders, winning competitions throughout the territory. Sam discovered a love of books and decided to become a lawyer, heading off to school in Denver when he turned 18. Helena published her most successful book yet, a comprehensive history of the Wyoming Territory told through the stories of its women. It became required reading in schools throughout the West, and she received letters from readers all over the country. But more important to her were the letters from young women saying her work had inspired them to pursue their own dreams, to believe they could be more than society expected. Ryder and Helena watched their children grow and leave, starting their own lives and families. Henry married a schoolteacher and took over the Double S completely, running it with the same care and dedication his father had shown. The twins both married ranchers and stayed in the area, raising their families close by. Sam practiced law in Cheyenne, but came home frequently, never losing his connection to the land that raised him. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Ryder and Helena sat on the porch of their house, now expanded and modernized but still fundamentally the same building Ryder had constructed with his own hands so many years before. They were both graying now, lines carved into their faces by sun and wind and time, but their love had only deepened. 30 years, Ryder said, rocking gently in his chair. 3 decades of terrible jokes, and I've laughed at every single one. Helena reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining automatically. Well, maybe not every single one. Some of them were really bad. All of them are really bad, that's the point, he smiled at her. But you laugh anyway. Because they're terrible in the best way. Because they're you, she squeezed his hand. I wouldn't change a single thing about our life together, Ryder, not one moment, not even the twins' teenage years. They were pretty rough. Okay, maybe I'd change those, but everything else, perfect. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains they'd looked at together for 3 decades. The ranch was prospering under Henry's management. Their grandchildren played in the yard most weekends. Helena's books lined the shelves in the house, physical proof of a dream realized. You know what the best part is, Ryder said eventually. What? We're not done yet. We've got years ahead of us still. More sunsets, more laughter, more terrible jokes. More adventures, Helena added. I'm thinking about writing another book about the changes we've witnessed in the West over our lifetime. Of course you are. You'll never stop writing, will you? Not as long as there are stories to tell. She looked at him. And you'll never stop ranching, even though Henry's running things now. Can't help it. It's in my blood. He paused. Speaking of which, I have a new joke for you. Oh no. What do you call an angry cow in a tornado? I have no idea. Utter destruction meets utter chaos. Helena laughed, throwing her head back, and Ryder's face lit up the way it always had, the way it always would. After 30 years, her laughter was still his favorite sound in the world. That was truly terrible, she said when she caught her breath. I know, but you laughed. I always laugh. It's one of the requirements of being married to you. Along with tolerating my mud tracking and my morning grumpiness and my inability to remember where I put things. Along with loving your kindness and your dedication and the way you've supported every dream I've ever had. Helena stood up and moved to sit on the arm of his rocking chair. You made me believe in love, Ryder. Real love, the kind that lasts and grows and becomes more beautiful with time. Ryder pulled her down onto his lap, and she settled there like she'd done 1,000 times before. You made me believe in myself, in the possibility of building a life that mattered. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Helena Sullivan. Second best, Helena corrected. The best thing was when I laughed at your terrible jokes and you knew I was your forever. Fair point. He kissed her soft and sweet. Here's to forever then, however long we have. Here's to forever, Helena agreed. They stayed on the porch until the stars came out, wrapped in each other's arms, still in love after 3 decades, still choosing each other every single day. The cowboy and the journalist from Philadelphia, brought together by bullets and bad jokes, bound together by laughter and love. And in the years that followed, that's how their grandchildren would remember them. Always together, always laughing, always looking at each other like they were the most precious thing in the world. Ryder lived to be 78, passing peacefully in his sleep with Helena's hand in his. Helena lived another 5 years, continuing to write until the very end, finishing one last book about the love of her life, the cowboy who had made terrible jokes and captured her heart in a meadow in the Wyoming Territory. They were buried side by side on a hillside overlooking the Double S Ranch, their headstones simple but meaningful. The whole community came to Helena's funeral, paying respects to a woman who had helped shape the territory with her words and her courage, and her refusal to be anything less than fully herself. Henry stood over his parents' graves after everyone had left, his own children and grandchildren around him. The Double S was still thriving, now in its 4th generation of Sullivans. His mother's books were still read and studied. But more than that, the legacy of love and laughter and choosing each other every day lived on in all of them. What was your favorite thing about Grandma and Grandpa? His youngest granddaughter asked. Henry smiled, remembering countless dinners filled with terrible jokes and genuine laughter, watching his parents hold hands as they walked through the ranch, the way they'd looked at each other even into their 70s like newlyweds. The way they loved each other, he said simply. From the moment Grandpa heard Grandma laugh at his terrible jokes, he knew she was his forever. And he was right. They were each other's forever through everything. That's the kind of love we should all aspire to. The little girl thought about this. Grandpa told terrible jokes. The worst, Henry confirmed. And Grandma laughed at every single one because that's what you do when you really love someone. You find joy in their joy, even when it's wrapped up in terrible cow puns. His granddaughter giggled, and Henry heard an echo of his mother's laughter in the sound. The legacy continued, generation after generation, built on a foundation of love and laughter and terrible jokes told by a cowboy who found his forever in a woman who wasn't afraid to laugh. The sun set over the Wyoming mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, and somewhere in the growing darkness, if you listened carefully, you might have heard the ghost of laughter, joyful and free, the sound of 2 souls who found each other against all odds and built a life worth remembering. Their story became legend in Alta, told and retold until it took on mythic proportions. But at its heart, it was simple. A man and a woman who found each other in the chaos of the Wild West, who chose love over fear, who built a life together on laughter and hard work and the deep certainty that they were meant for each other. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.